The right dose of stress. Your home sits at a perfect 21 degrees Celsius. That's 70 Fahrenheit. Food arrives without costing you a single calorie of effort to find it. You take the elevator, not the hill. And if you're honest, you can't remember the last time you were truly cold, truly hungry, or truly out of breath. By almost every measure, human life has never been this comfortable. So why do so many of us feel soft, fragile, and vaguely unwell? Here's an uncomfortable idea. The comfort itself is part of the problem. Not because suffering is noble, it isn't, but because your body was built to expect a certain amount of hardship and quietly falls apart without it. The old world never let you stay comfortable for long. The modern one removed the friction almost entirely, and your biology noticed. To get the steel, you have to beat the iron. That one's mine, and yes, I'm flexing a little. But before you go buy an ice pod, stay with me, because the popular version of this idea is where it all goes wrong. For now, add it to the cart and wait a bit. A quick word on why I'm the one telling you this. I've spent my working life as a survival instructor and a mental coach, teaching people to stay functional when conditions turn hard, and I've written 2 books on survival and the psychology of performing under pressure. Of everything I know about the body, this is the single most useful principle, and the one the wellness industry most reliably mangles. It has a name, hormesis. The word comes from the Greek for to stimulate, and it's the biological version of a line you already know. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, which we owe to Nietzsche, back in 1889. Think of it as controlled discomfort, a tiny dose of stress that wakes up your body's cellular defense system. The word itself comes out of toxicology, and its core finding is strange and precise. The dose makes the medicine. A low dose of a stressor stimulates and strengthens. A high dose of the same thing harms. Scientists call this a biphasic dose response. Benefit on the way up, damage past the peak. In biology and medicine, hormesis is the body's adaptive response to a moderate, usually brief, stress. Paracelsus put it best, back in 1538, all things are poison, and nothing is without poison. The dosage alone makes a thing not a poison. Exercise is the cleanest example there is. A hard workout is biologically controlled damage. You tear muscle fibers, spark inflammation, and flood your cells with molecules usually described as harmful. Then your body doesn't just repair, it over-repairs, rebuilding a little stronger than before, braced for next time. Heat does a version of this. So does cold. So does going without food for a while. So, it turns out, do many of the plant compounds we call healthy, mild stressors that nudge your cells to toughen up. The pattern underneath cold plunges, saunas, fasting, and lifting is not 4 separate hacks. It's one rule, a recoverable dose of stress, followed by adaptation. The first thing I ever learned about weight training was the growth triad: workout, nutrition, and recovery. Once you've recovered, get back to the gym and repeat. That's hormesis in a nutshell. So why does this matter? Most health advice arrives as a pile of disconnected rules. Do this, avoid that, buy this. Hormesis is worth knowing because it collapses that pile into a single principle, and one you can actually reason with. Once you understand it, you stop needing to memorize protocols and start being able to evaluate them. Someone sells you a new practice, a breathing method, a supplement, a fasting window, a plunge. You have one question that cuts through the marketing. Is this a recoverable dose of stress that provokes an adaptation? Or is it just damage, or just comfort dressed up as a hack? That question is a filter, and it's yours to keep. In a field crowded with people selling certainty, being able to think for yourself is the whole advantage. It also quietly rewrites your relationship with discomfort. Hunger, cold, hard breathing, tired muscles. For most of modern life, these register as problems to eliminate. Hormesis reframes them as inputs, not things gone wrong, but the specific signals a body evolved to expect and now rarely receives. That shift matters more than it sounds. It moves you from "I feel weak, something's wrong with me," to "I've removed the stressors my system needs, and I can put them back." That's not a small feeling. That's agency. And because the rule is biphasic, Good on the way up, harmful past the peak. It's the rare idea that guards both mistakes at once. It warns the comfortable person who never stresses the system, and it warns the intense one drowning it in ice baths and starvation. Almost everyone is erring in one of those two directions. Hormesis is the single lens that keeps you off both cliffs. And one last, honest reason. Knowing this won't hand you a longer life, that promise is still unproven in humans. What it gives you is more dependable, a working model of how a body gets stronger, a way to tell signal from noise, and permission to be a little uncomfortable on purpose. In a world built to remove every hardship, knowing how much to add back and when to stop may be the most valuable skill nobody's trying to sell you. Now here's the part almost everyone gets backwards, and where most wellness advice quietly falls apart. If the stress is the signal, then blocking the stress blocks the benefit. In 2009, researchers put young men through 4 weeks of exercise. Half of them also took high doses of vitamin C and vitamin E, antioxidants, the supplements sold specifically to fight damage. You'd expect the protected group to do better. They did worse. The exercise-driven improvement in their insulin sensitivity was blunted, and the cellular machinery that builds long-term resilience barely switched on. The very damage those supplements mopped up was the message telling the body to adapt. It was a small study of healthy young men on one supplement combination, so hold it loosely. But the underlying mechanism, sometimes called mitohormesis, has held up, and it turns the naive story on its head. Oxidative stress is bad, so take antioxidants sounds obviously right, and is, in this context, obviously wrong. The discomfort was doing the work. Now a dose you can actually feel. In Finland, researchers followed roughly 2,300 middle-aged men for about 2 decades. The men who used a sauna 4 to 7 times a week had around half the rate of fatal cardiovascular disease of those who went once a week, and the more often they went, the lower the risk fell. Heat is a genuine stressor. Sit in a sauna, and your heart rate climbs as if you were walking briskly, and over time the system adapts. I want to be careful here, because this is exactly the kind of finding that gets oversold. This was an observational study, not a controlled trial, and only in Finnish men, which means healthier people might simply sauna more, not that the sauna alone bought them years. What it shows is a strong, dose-dependent association, not proof of cause. I'd bet it's one real piece of a larger pattern, because exercise, heat, cold, and fasting all point the same direction. But linked to is not causes, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Everything above lives or dies on one word, biphasic. Low dose, adaptation. High dose, injury. Balance is the key. In everything. The wellness industry has taken hormesis and quietly deleted the second half of the curve, as if the line only ever goes up. It doesn't. 2-hour daily ice baths, chronic undereating, training through every injury, that isn't extra hormesis. It's the toxic end of the same graph. So let me be precise about what we actually know. That acute, recoverable stress drives adaptation is a documented mechanism. That it meaningfully extends a human lifespan is a plausible hypothesis, robust in worms, flies, and mice, but not established in people, because those trials are slow and hard and mostly haven't been run. And the exact doses that work for you are an experiment only you can run, slowly, with recovery built in. If a little is good, a lot is better isn't a bolder version of this truth. It's just the opposite of it. So how do you actually use it? The move is not to suffer more. It's to add back small, recoverable stressors your comfortable life deleted, and then, just as deliberately, to recover. Move until it's honestly hard, a few times a week. Get uncomfortably warm, or briefly cold if your health allows it. Let yourself be genuinely hungry sometimes, instead of grazing all day. Then sleep, rest, and eat enough to rebuild, because the adaptation happens during recovery, not during the stress. Miss the recovery, and you're just collecting damage. Comfort isn't the enemy. Permanent, frictionless comfort is. The dose is the whole game. Your body was shaped by a world that never let it get too comfortable for too long. The friction was the point. The task now isn't to run back to the Stone Age, it's to add the right dose back, on purpose. And the same curve, it turns out, governs pressure on the mind. But that's a piece for another day. Is the ice pod still in the cart? Now you can buy it. I hope this one made you a little uncomfortable. Body, environment, mind. If this way of seeing things resonates, subscribe, it's free, and it's the best way to get the next piece. We're just getting started.